Mr. President, in the opening scene of Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader pays an unexpected visit to the construction of the new Death Star. Of course, it was behind schedule, probably over budget. The commander in charge first claimed that there was no delay. Then he said to Darth Vader that it would be impossible to meet the schedule without more resources. Now, Darth Vader warned the commander that the Emperor was, quote, much displeased with the apparent lack of progress, noting the Emperor is not as forgiving as I am. Now, government projects being over budget, behind schedule, or just out of this world are not just a problem for the Emperor in that galaxy far, far away. They're a problem right here on Earth. Our own space agency, NASA, can no longer even launch astronauts into orbit. Yet NASA is spending $1.2 million to study the impact of microgravity on sheep. NASA is also spending $280,000 to develop plans to build a cloud city on Venus. Now, it's strikingly similar to the cloud city that was featured in Star Wars: The Emperor Strikes Back, where Han Solo was captured in carbonite. The National Science Foundation is spending $2.6 million in part to design sculptures that would raise awareness of drought and harvest dew, much like the moisture vaporizers on Luke Skywalker's home planet of Tatooine. The Pentagon is spending $2 million to teach robots how to play jazz, and $2.5 million in part to create a robot lobby greeter. These are not the droids the taxpayers were looking for. These are just a few of the examples of projects featured in the Wastebook, the Farce Awakens, which I will release today. This is a spoiler alert, so if you don't want the plot to be ruined, you may want to tune out right now. Let's walk through some of these other Wastebook entries. They include $1 million to put monkeys in hamster balls on a treadmill. Now, Senator Tom Coburn a couple of years ago famously found the example of the study of shrimp on treadmills. Shrimp on little treadmills underwater. But I think this outdoes it. Now we have monkeys not only on a treadmill, but monkeys in a hamster ball on a treadmill. $1 million for that study. We're spending $5 million to throw parties for hipsters. Now, these parties for hipsters are an attempt to keep hipsters, how we define a hipster is quite a work of art as well, but try to keep them from smoking. But admittedly, didn't succeed very well, so they ended up just giving out cash and try to induce hipsters to stop smoking. Good work if you can get it, I guess. $43 million to build a single gas station in Afghanistan that dispenses a type of fuel, natural gas in this case, that very few automobiles in the country can even run on. Now, despite all the public ballyhooing over budget austerity, Washington doesn't come up short on outlandish ways to spend and waste money in 2015. All the examples in the Wastebook that we have here had to have money spent during 2015. Unfortunately, there's a lot of talk about the gridlock in Washington, but no matter how bad the gridlock gets, no matter how bad it appears, there's always one area of agreement here between the parties, and that is to spend more money. For example, at the end of October, Congress passed a budget deal that cut $3 billion in taxpayer-funded subsidies to private insurance companies that service federal crop insurance policies. That deal was sold in part on the savings generated through the spending cut. But last week, this body voted overwhelmingly to restore all $3 billion of those crop insurance subsidies, which again only go to private insurance companies. This was part of the highway bill that came to the floor. So spending that we had cut just a month ago in the budget deal was reversed 36 days later in an agreement that passed even before we passed the original bill to obliterate these savings. So it took Congress only 36 days to go back on these cuts. I'm sure the Millennium Falcon can pull a 360 with that kind of ease. I'm not sure that that could happen. Washington equates caring with the amount of dollars spent, but no amount of dollars and cents can make up for the lack of common sense in how millions of dollars of taxpayer money is being spent here. Consider this. We outline in this Wastebook more than $2 million spent by the Agency for International Development, USAID, $2 million this year to promote tourism in Lebanon. Now, Lebanon is the same country that our State Department has warned American tourists not to go to. So we're spending $2 million in one agency to promote tourism to a country that another agency, the State Department, says, please don't go to. What kind of sense does that make? Suicide bombers have killed more than 60 people, injured hundreds more in the last 2 years there. It's no wonder the State Department is saying, don't go. But the Agency for International Development is spending $2 million to say, please go there for tourism. Department of Homeland Security spent $3 million on party buses and luxury coaches to the playgrounds of the rich and famous. Buses for the rich and famous, party buses, being spent from the Department of Homeland Security. Where does that make sense? This is one that just puzzles me. Department of Housing and Urban Development is spending more than $104 million a year subsidizing the rent of the well-off, including those who make better than six-figure incomes, some who have millions of dollars in assets, while 300,000 low-income families are on a waiting list for housing assistance. So we're spending $104 million subsidizing those with six-figure incomes to live in public housing, while 300,000 people who are truly low income wait on waiting lists. Somebody at one of the local housing authorities was asked why we do this, why we don't just kick those out who have incomes far too high to qualify. And the answer was revealing. He said, we can't do that because they serve as role models to those who are truly low income in those facilities. Now think of that. Those who are fleecing the taxpayers are role models for those in public housing that actually have low income. As I mentioned before, the Pentagon is spending $2 million to teach robots how to play jazz music. The Department of Agriculture spent $68,000 in foreign food aid to send a group to the Great American Beer Festival to promote beer in Vietnam. $68,000 foreign food aid to have a bunch of people come to the Great American Beer Festival. National Institutes of Health spent about $1 million, as I mentioned, on the monkey on a treadmill study. The purpose of this research? To determine if other studies can be conducted of monkeys on treadmills. I think everybody will have to agree this is totally bananas. I mean, we can't continue to spend money like this. Many other taxpayer-funded science projects sounded like they were concocted in a frat house rather than a government research agency like this one. $103 million was spent by the National Science Foundation. This was a grant. It's studying if koozies really keep a cool drink in a can cool, or if it's just wishful thinking. I think we've had plenty of studies on evaporation and condensation to know what really happens, but these studies were conducted, with a koozie in somebody's bathroom or laundry room somewhere. It doesn't really qualify as serious science, yet we spent $1.3 million on a grant to do just that. You've got to watch the video. You got to see it. The National Institute for Drug Abuse spent nearly $1 million to prove pizza is as addictive as crack. The study's results will be a surprise to no one. The NSF is spending over $1 million on dating studies, including why attractive people date, why they date those who are not attractive, and what makes those looking for love online swipe right and pursue a romantic relationship. Now, how in the world we're spending money on dating studies, the NSF, to find out why people like my wife, would date somebody less attractive like me. I mean, some of these things we'll just have to let go, I think, and not spend taxpayer money on. These price tags are pocket change to the big spenders in Washington who collectively burn through $7 million a minute, as we all know. Nobody can really keep track of how or why some of this money is spent. The purpose for Wastebook this year is created to do our best to hold those accountable who are spending this money. In his farewell address a year ago, Senator Tom Coburn, who created Wastebook, challenged every member of Congress to produce their own Wastebook and start a real debate about national spending and budget priorities. While it's impossible to emulate or replace Dr. Coburn, he's given us a great example to follow. As a longtime admirer and former colleague and friend of Dr. Coburn, it's a great and heavy responsibility to join others like Senator James Lankford and John McCain to try to carry forward the Coburn legacy of stopping wasteful Washington spending and to bring some kind of oversight to this. You can find the full list of 100 Wastebook entries on my website as well. As you glance through it, ask yourself if the federal government is really being frugal and as underfunded as it claims to be. Ask yourself, are we really cutting to the bone? Is there no more fat left to cut? We hear that continually. Sequester-level spending has brought us to the brink that there's just nowhere else to cut. It's my hope, my only hope, that this report gives Congress something to chewy on before, and the end of bad puns too, I hope, before debt and deficit saddles taxpayers and they finally strike back at this lunacy. But I would commend this Wastebook to all who will read it. As I mentioned, you can reach it on our website as well. And with that, Mr. President, I yield back.